Hey everyone, host of Shelves, Jeremy Meyer here. If you like the podcast, I thought I'd recommend a couple others for you. If you want to hear more about unproduced scripts, check out Screenplay Archaeology. If you want to hear some other movie or entertainment related discussion, check out the Entertainment Buffet podcast. If you're interested in some video game discussion, check out my friends over at the Darkcast and darkstation.com. Also be sure to visit some of our friends of the show, the Nerds and Marks podcast and 616 Entertainment. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Oh my lord, I don't even know if I remember how to do this. Welcome to the Shelves podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer, and it's been a little while since I've sat down and done this, and I feel like the last 4 episodes have all kind of had that same message right at the beginning. It's been a while since I've podcasted, and I don't really have a lot of excuses as to the inconsistency of the posting of the episodes. You know, I was posting on Twitter about every other week of, hey, you know, this is the week I'm posting an episode, and life just gets in the way. And, you know, I've mentioned in previous episodes I've been doing a lot of working behind the scenes on my own stuff, which is maintained true. I have been working on a lot of my own writing, and I would often prioritize my own writing over podcasting just because, you know, it is a little more important. Podcasting is a hobby, and while writing, you know, I try to turn into a career. But, you know, podcasting is a hobby that I wish I could do every day. Like if I had the means to work out some time and sit down every day and, you know, talking to a microphone, I would love to, because I talk way too much as it is, and I need to get that out somehow. So yeah, honestly, it's been just a lot of, I just haven't felt it, like the inspiration I need to sit down and read a script and record an episode. And I'd always kind of felt like if I just sat down and got into a script, because I've been doing some reading, like I've been reading a lot of like comics and like a book and stuff like that, but my reading has gone down a lot, and that's been on me. You know, you wake up in the morning, you just have those days where it's like it's hard to get out of bed that morning. Like that's been me. Unfortunately, this podcast does take a lot of work to do, even though like I did kind of, you know, bring it down a little bit. Like I don't have a guest very often anymore. You know, I had a lot of interview stuff lined up that I kind of just let go just because like I wasn't feeling inspired to pursue these people and like, you know, really nail some stuff down. And I feel bad for what that content could have been. It probably could have been a lot of fun, and like I'm kicking myself because like I need to put myself out there and do these things. And you know, I regret the time I haven't been spending on the podcast, but recently I managed to pick up a script and I read through it. I picked up another script, read through that one, and you know, I was kind of feeling it again. So I wanted October to be a packed month. You know, every year I usually do my Shocktober, where I watch and review a horror movie every day in October, and this is the first year that I've kind of skipped it, although I might do an episode later because I have watched a good amount of horror movies. I usually start in September. I've actually watched a lot of movies recently, and literally as I'm recording this, I am just like minutes removed from having seen Joker. So, you know, I have a lot of feelings to say about like a lot of movies I've seen. Like over the last week, I checked off like 5 movies off my 2019 list. I think currently where I'm sitting, like one of the only major releases that has come out this year that I haven't seen is Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I might be watching very soon. So there's a lot of under the radar releases and stuff. We'll see what's getting hyped around Oscar time as well to see like what movies I need to cram in for 2019 stuff. But so far, like looking at my list of 2019 movies, like I definitely have a top 10 already. But obviously, as movies come out, there's, a few movies that I'm still really looking forward to seeing. Knives Out being one of them. Star Wars, obviously. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I still need to see. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm still like trying to squeeze in there. So yeah, it's been a while since I've podcasted, but I have a script, and I have 3 that I'm going to be covering this month that I'm going to, since it is kind of late in the month. What's today? Today, as I'm recording this, is the 20th. So this episode should be posting on the 21st tomorrow on Monday. There's only one other Monday in October, and I post on Mondays. So today will be this episode. Next week will be a related episode, and then I'm going to drop one on Halloween as well. And then I might actually squeeze out an episode on Friday of just like a little bit of review catch up of like 2019 movies and stuff like that. I might put together some Joker talk for that episode. A lot of my friends have already seen it. I was kind of one of the last people to see it, but it's a movie that I think needs to be discussed. So yeah, as you can see from the title of today's episode, today we're going to be talking about Resident Evil. And I know you're thinking, hey, wait, wasn't like Resident Evil like the second episode of your podcast? And you're right, it was. This is a different script. So the script we talked about before was George Romero's Resident Evil. That was like a movie that was supposed to happen before the movie that came out. And, was a lot closer to the games and, fell through for whatever reason. Today, we're going to be talking about the actual script for the movie that we got. And we're looking at the first draft written by Paul W.S. Anderson. And that's going to keep in with the theme for this month. I have 3 scripts for Resident Evil movies. Actually, I believe I have 4 now. So today we're going to be covering the first movie. On next Monday, we're going to be covering it's confusing because the third movie, Extinction, the script was called Aftermath, but then the 4th movie ended up being called Aftermath. So I have 2 scripts called Resident Evil Aftermath. One is for the 3rd movie, one is for the 4th movie. Just to keep things not complicated, normally I title the episodes by the episode of the script name. I'm just going to call the 3rd one Resident Evil Extinction and the 4th one Resident Evil Aftermath. And I'm actually currently remembering I do have Resident Evil Retribution, which was the 5th movie, but that script might be a shooting script and might just be pretty much what the movie was. I am going to have to read through that one to see if it does garner an episode. So coming up, it's a whole lot of Resident Evil in our near future. I actually did want to put out a Halloween episode on Halloween because I do have a Halloween script that I've been wanting to read, but I think just time-wise, that's not going to happen. We're starting a huge sale at my work, so my day job is going to be running very late. I'm actually not even sure when I'm going to have time to record like a Joker episode for Friday or a review episode for Friday. But I'm going to try to squeeze it in. Luckily I've already read the 2 scripts, so I will have the Extinction episode ready for Monday. I'll record that over the weekend. And my goal is to finish the Aftermath script this week so I can just record both episodes over the weekend, have one ready for Monday, one ready for Halloween. But we're going to get into Resident Evil by Paul W.S. Anderson, and I have a interesting love-hate relationship with this franchise. Video game movies, I love video game movies. Most of them are not very good. I think there are actually quite a few that don't get enough credit for how good they actually are or how acceptable they are. For example, Assassin's Creed, I think, is a totally fine movie. Most people just come out and say that it's flat out bad. I completely disagree with that. I don't think it's an amazing movie, but I really enjoy it. The Resident Evil movies are a mixed... I hate using the term mixed bag. They're a cornucopia of quality. Yeah, sure, that'll work. Paul W.S. Anderson is somebody I would love to have a conversation with, and if anybody can set that up, let me know. He's directed some movies that I legitimately love, and he's directed some movies that have made me want to beat my head against the wall and say, how did you get away with this? Starting with some good things first. I love the Mortal Kombat movie. I think the original Mortal Kombat movie is legitimately a good, fun movie. It's a dumb popcorn movie maybe, but I think it's a really good adaptation of a video game, and probably the first good video game movie, and still honestly my favorite. Soldier, I think, is a really good movie, really underrated. Event Horizon is a little dated and it's like special effects and stuff, but I think is a really solid horror film. I actually like Pompeii. It's not a great movie, but it's well made. I think he is a good director of kind of like popcorn action movies. But there is a problem of one day he saw The Matrix and everything just kind of became that. And I feel like it kind of starts with Resident Evil. I'm trying to think back on his filmography, and like I think Resident Evil was kind of the first one where it was just like, you clearly wanted to make The Matrix and you did not get to. But I still think he does some good things. Like I said, some of the Resident Evil movies are still pretty decent, and I do think the first one is one of the better ones. Honestly, if you were gonna ask me, 1, 2, and 3, 2 being the worst of those ones, are all pretty solid. 4 is kind of some okay trash. 5 is one of the worst movies I've ever seen and legitimately made me angry. And 6, the final chapter, was a movie that I had to pause because I was laughing so goddamn hard. And again, Paul W.S. Anderson, I would love to have a conversation with you about this and be able to, kind of poke fun a little bit, but also I love some of your work legitimately, so I'd love to talk about it. And that would be that's like on my bucket list. I just want to have a conversation with this dude. So Resident Evil, it's a movie I was very excited for when it came out. Resident Evil is one of my favorite franchises of all time. Resident Evil 2 is like in my top 3 favorite video games of all time. And, zombies are completely outplayed nowadays. Like The Walking Dead pretty much has the cornerstone on the zombie market. Like, I'm a firm believer of like, if you're not The Walking Dead, just like don't do zombie stuff, because like they got it handled. It's on almost every week at this point. There's fucking 2 shows. There's gonna be a 3rd one. It is what it is. Like, and that is the version of zombies that we all kind of think of, like the George Romero style zombies. That's what that show does, and they do it best. Resident Evil at least takes it in a bit of a different direction, where it's not just zombies, it's like monsters, it's like, biological warfare and stuff. Secret government, or not government, but a secret corporation, like espionage and stuff like that. It's a fascinating franchise and has a, rich backstory and like great characters, and the movie did none of that. And that's one of the main contentions with that franchise is there's only one that like follows the story of the games, and it's one of the worst movies. All the other movies kind of just cherry pick things from the games and put them in nonsensically, and if we ever get to Resident Evil Retribution, that is what I'm talking about. It's a franchise I love to hate. I love talking about these movies, even though nobody should ever spend as much time thinking about them as I have. I wrote a piece a long time ago for darkstation.com, which is like a video game website I wrote for. Shout out to all my friends there. And you can go look that up. It's like a retrospective on the Resident Evil franchise. I'm sure if you search that and my name, it'll pop right up. But I that was at the time the 5th movie was the newest one. And yeah, I kind of broke these movies down. I love talking about them, and it's so crazy because they're probably not movies that deserve as much in-depth analysis as I like to give them. But I don't know. It's just like I said, it's one of those things I love to hate. But the first movie, it came out, it came and went. The franchise was pretty successful overall. I think like all the movies combined, it made almost like $1 billion or crossed $1 billion at some point. I mean, 6 movies all making like 150 to 200 million a piece. Like, that's going to happen eventually. They all did pretty well. The soundtracks, I actually like a lot of the soundtracks, and I like the scores. They had a lot of licensed soundtracks, and if you're into like some rock and metal music, they had a lot of good stuff on there. The music scores were all super good and interesting. The first and third in particular, that really stood out to me. But yeah. So, Resident Evil, the movie, the script, the first draft. The first thing I want to point out when I was reading the script is just how rough first drafts can be. A lot of spelling errors. Looking at Paul W.S. Anderson as a writer, I almost feel embarrassed for him that this is out in the public. It's, so the movie opens, the script opens the same as the movie with somebody taking the T virus out of the lab, and breaking it, all the people getting killed by the computer in the beginning. It's all pretty much identical up to the point where our main character, Alice, who would go on to be played by Mila Jovovich, wakes up naked in the mansion. And like the type of writing we're looking at here is, she wakes up naked and like she's perfect or whatever, and it's just really, really misogynistic views on women, and a lot of dialogue that comes, like the dialogue in this first draft is bad. Like there are definitely lines in the script that mirror the movie, and those are kind of the only good lines in the script, and the movie is not something I would point out of like as having great dialogue, but some of those lines are fine. Yeah, it's so, the movie kind of, it goes fairly along the path, or the script goes fairly along the path as the movie. She wakes up in the mansion, it's a little expanded, like she goes outside of the mansion into like a garden and stuff, and there's things that draw her back into the house, and that's when the commandos show up. They're not just like busting through all the windows and shit like in the movie. It's, a little more just kind of creeping up on her and stuff. So, interesting to see these kind of little differences. They bring them down into the hive, the underground facility underneath the mansion. I guess I never really run down like a synopsis of some of these movies. I feel like, if you're watching a podcast on Resident Evil, sorry, my cat's like meowing at me for attention here. I don't know if he's coming up on the mic or not, but incorporation, giant medical corporation called Umbrella is developing bioweapons in a secret laboratory underneath a mansion. The virus gets out, turns people into zombies, yada yada. If you're coming to a Resident Evil script, I assume you know this story already. But yeah, it's all pretty much the same. Like some characters are swapped around, and I think that's kind of done with casting. I don't know how familiar anyone is with the movie. I might recommend rewatching the movie before diving into this episode. But there's a character, one of the male commandos named JD, and his roles was swapped with what would go on to be Michelle Rodriguez's character, Rain, in the script. And I think it was because like they cast Michelle Rodriguez and probably saw, I believe this was after Fast and the Furious. Like, I don't know what that movie did for her as an actress. Like, now she's like one of the main characters of that movie, but I feel like in that first movie she was just kind of a background character. She was just kind of there. She didn't have a lot of standout scenes in that one. It was more like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now 9, where she was one of the kind of like forefront characters. But yeah, like clearly her role was like beefed up with her casting, and maybe it was just like her audition. They saw like, oh, well, maybe we should like change these characters around. So like their roles in the script are swapped. If you remember, so I mean, we'll get there. Yeah, so the commandos come in, they take her down to the lab. And this time they don't like take a train there. It's more of like an elevator situation. It's like if you recall in Resident Evil 2, the video game, there's the part where you're fighting the tyrant William Birkin, I can't remember. On the train that's like on an elevator that's like going down a shaft. It's a similar situation in the script because that will come up again at the end. But yeah, they they're going down. They find Spence, the other guy who's like her fake husband, because they're Umbrella operatives in the mansion. They have no memory because of the computer's defenses. All that's the beginning is all pretty consistent with just like different dialogue. Like the scenes are a little different. There's the scene where they have to like bust their way into the hive, and then the dude walks in and the room's all dark and they get the lights on. Like that's not in the script. It's kind of just like, they take the elevator there and then they're just in, and then they make their way through the specimen room, they find the drowned scientists in the room, just like in the movie. They make their way through the specimen room, just like in the movie. They make their way to the Red Queen, just like in the movie. The laser room happens pretty much exactly as it is. The Red Queen holographic scene, it's a little different. Like in this version, she's just like like in the movie they pull out this huge like mainframe thing. In the script, it's just like a little compact thing that they pull out to shut down the Red Queen, which again is something that comes up later. So yeah, we move into the scene where the zombies show up. They shut down the Red Queen. It opens all the doors, so now all the zombies can get out. This scene plays out a little differently in the movie. Michelle Rodriguez, or the character Rain, walks off on her own, encounters the first zombie, and I actually really like some of these scenes in the first movie. Like I like the first zombie appearance in the movie. There's God, how many times am I saying in the movie? You could probably fucking start a drinking game. There's a scene I've actually been kind of want to rewatch this. All my DVDs are packed away right now, and like I kind of want to dig these ones out just to watch this, or maybe I should just suck it up and buy the Blu-ray pack, because I am definitely going to get traction out of these movies. I'm going to do commentary tracks for them at some point, because that is something I am building up to doing. I do have a shelved Bandcamp account, and I'm going to do commentary tracks. The Resident Evil franchise is definitely one, and I'm going to make an effort to have a guest on every commentary track. There might be a couple I do solo, but I want to guess for all of those. Just a heads up, I am going to pull the Star Wars trilogy commentary tracks off all of the commentary tracks on the feed. I'm going to pull those all down so I can throw them up on the Bandcamp. So if you want to hear those, I would suggest go do it now. The Star Wars commentary tracks I watched with my wife, who had never seen them before. So for her, it's the first time watching all of them. So that was like really fun to do. And, that's the thing. It's always for years like, hey, come watch these movies with me. And then, I convinced her to do it for the first time on the podcast. So it's kind of fun seeing like a non-fan's first reaction to it on the podcast. But that's enough of that. We're talking about Resident Evil right now. So yeah, everybody makes their way to the specimen room. The zombies show up. So the difference here, they're struggling to get the door open, and, they get the door open, and in the movie, JD gets pulled in, like, the door opens, there's like a horde of zombies there, and he gets pulled in and just like devoured. In the script, it's Rain. Rain is actually the one who gets pulled in and eaten. So, she's gone from the movie at that point, or from the script. And that was something that they switched around. I don't know, I don't know if Michelle Rodriguez was just a more high profile actress at the time, but or maybe they just really liked her in the audition. But I know when she was. She had told her manager at some point that she's like, hey, if anyone ever makes a script on a Resident Evil movie, I want to be involved, like, in any form. And that was how she got the role in the movie. So, whatever it was, that got switched. And honestly, for the better. The role of JD in the movie was, God, I'm so aware of how many times I'm saying in the movie right now. In the film, his role, or his, it was kind of like whatever. So probably a good switch. So we have the point where everybody gets split up. I'm trying to remember the actor's name. The character of Matt in the film. What was his name? He was also in Cruel Intentions. I can't think of it. But he's like the activist guy that was posing as a cop to get into the hive. Him and Alice and the rest of the squad, they all kind of get separated in different ways. So then we come to the dog scene. The dog scene in the movie. In the film, God damn it, it's the scene everybody probably remembers from the trailer, or one of the scenes people remember from the movie. The dogs show up, the group of dogs, she shoots them down, she Matrix kicks one off the wall. It's ridiculous. You get that slow motion run and jump with the heavy metal guitar. I love how dumb these movies are. But yeah, in the script it's pretty different. So the cages are like full human-sized cages, and she ends up inside one with a dog. And there's this really ridiculous moment. So she has amnesia, and she's remembering things. And there's a scene where there's like a dog on her, and like throughout the film and in the script as well, there's like parts of her remembering her past, and she has these little flashbacks. In this scene, she has a flashback to like schematics of the dog, which is ridiculous because the dogs aren't engineered. They show in the script and in the film, there's the scene where like the virus is spreading throughout the place, and the dogs get infected, and you see like they're all fucked up because they had to bust their way out of the cages. And in this, it's like, oh, it's almost like the dog is engineered, and they had actual fucking schematics for the dog showing a weak point, and she remembers this and hits the weak point and like disables the dog, and then she gets out of the cage and turns around, and the dog keeper is there as a zombie, and she remembers her training and fucks him up and then takes his gun. It's not as, the movie version I think is way better, even though it is a little simpler. One of my biggest issues with this franchise is Resident Evil is a horror series. It became action oriented come like the fourth game, but it is a horror series by nature, and the movies have always just been action movies. Like the first and third are like the only movies that I actually feel kind of qualify as horror films, but it's only because the third one is the most graphic one in terms of violence, and the first one is the only one that tries to do a horror tone, even though it isn't scary. It's mostly cheap jump scares and stuff like that, but there are some like good moments in it. But yeah, so the dog scene, there's no Matrix kick. She just gets the gun from the zombie dude and then kind of fucks him up after the one's locked in the cage. So normally after that is Alice and Matt like running back, or no, I'm sorry. So after that we get the scene with Matt. He walks off to find any information he can about Umbrella being involved, and that's when the zombie of his sister shows up, and Alice shows up and saves him. She saves him in this one, but it's a little different. And unfortunately, I didn't note how it is different, and I read this a while ago, but this scene does play out differently. The dialogue between the two was different. There's he goes a little harder on Umbrella's responsibility and stuff like that. So then we cut to the scene where, they show up back in the room with the Red Queen, which is a little like in the film. It never made sense to me because the commandos are stuck in the room with where the Red Queen is, and outside is supposed to be a bunch of zombies, and somehow Alice and Matt just run through that hall and get in the door, even though that hall is supposed to be full of zombies. Never really made sense. It's still kind of the same here. I don't get it. So again, they have to reactivate the Red Queen. Oh, okay. No, wait. That's why it doesn't make sense. I'm reading my notes wrong. That scene happens without Alice and Matt. In the film, Alice comes back with Matt, and then it's her idea to reactivate the Red Queen. In this one, it's the mercenary. It's like a group decision. They're all just sitting there, and they gotta figure something out. It's like, all right, well, why don't we just turn it back on? And the dialogue with the Red Queen is really snippy. It's a lot more talk about how humans just want to kill each other. And just this whole sequence is just set up a little differently, and it was kind of dumb because you have two characters that are not there. Alice and Matt, while they're talking to the Red Queen, it's jumping back to them in the office talking about the government conspiracy and all that shit. So didn't really make sense. They talk about how there's the bit where if you get scratched or bitten, it infects you, but in this version it says you don't turn until you die, which is I don't think they meant it that way, because there are scenes later in the movie that play out a little differently, but I think what he meant to say here is it'll kill you and then you'll turn, but in this it makes it sound like, oh, you're fine until you just die from whatever kills you, but I don't think that's what's actually supposed to mean here. And the Red Queen says they won't let anyone infected leave. So then, while this is going on, we then cut to a scene of Matt and Alice, who are just lost in the facility trying to find their way back. So the groups, they kind of come together, the commandos, they decide to take the Red Queen with them, which is a lot different from what happens in the film. In the film, they just kind of leave her plugged in, and she talks to them later through the cameras and speaker system and stuff. But in the film, they just have this little compact thing that's basically a little hologram that she shows up on and keeps talking to them. It also has a map on there. And she, one thing that's a little different is she's there's another heat signature in the hive somewhere. So it's kind of implying oh, there's somebody else there, but I assumed, and I think everybody else correctly can assume, that the other heat signature is the liquor, which is, the creature from the game. It's this skinless human with giant claws and a long tongue and the brain on the outside. They're basically turned inside out. One thing that's really ridiculous is, the groups come back together, and it cuts, the next scene, which is consistent with the film, is they are going to go through the sewer system or the utility system of the hive to get from one place to the other. In the movie, it's done way better. Take a drink, I said, in the movie. Where, it just cuts to them crawling or, sneaking through the tunnels. It's very dark. It's very moody. Some creepy high-tech music going on. In the fucking script, they find one of those carts that people drive, how people talk about they have the underground tunnels at Disneyland. I was literally picturing the scene from Austin Powers where he's in that little cart and he gets stuck going back and forth. Yeah, they're basically driving one of those and joking around as they're running over zombies in the tunnels. There's a couple here and there that they're just running over. But then they like turn a corner and run into a horde and crash, and like it all just kind of turns into chaos. Someone's trapped under the thing, zombies are coming. It's so much better in the act, like what they actually did versus in the script. This scene is like ridiculous, and it is one of the like better scenes in the movie. Take a drink. So during the scene, Alice has a flashback of being Lisa's contact, which is Lisa was Matt's sister. That she was in there as an informant to try to find some stuff. So Matt talks earlier about how there was a contact in here that betrayed her, so it's kind of planting the seed of like, oh, did Alice betray her? But we all know she doesn't. So they're fighting the zombies, trying to get the cart, or whatever you want to call it, golf cart thing, righted, and then the thing doesn't work anymore. So you get the moment where they have to climb up onto the pipes ahead, or above them, I mean. So they do that, and the pipes break, and JD gets like badly mauled. One of the characters, because all the mercenaries have like the main mercenary, who was played by what's his name, like Colin Simon or whatever. His name was 1 in the movie, even though they never actually say it. And in the script, a lot of the characters are like, 1 and 12, which how much can you really care about their characters when they're named after numbers? And like I feel like there's a reason for it to like, Umbrella just treats these people like disposable mercenaries. They literally just have numbers, but for a film that doesn't work. 12 in the movie actually gets renamed to Kaplan. He's one of the mercenaries. Like he's the mercenary in the film who's like running the computer when the laser room scene is happening. He's the one that gets left behind on these pipes, which we're gonna talk a little more about that scene as well. So yeah, JD gets attacked and bitten and stuff, but I believe he ends up getting away. I'm trying to check my notes. Yeah, okay, so he ends up getting away. And then we see, everybody gets off to another area and the pipes break, just like in the film. And 12, also known as Kaplan, he's laying on the pipe, and there's a scene where he's like going to kill himself, and they reveal that he doesn't, which was something I always thought was a problem in the movie. Like they're all leaving, they leave him behind. The zombies are coming up after him, and it looks like he's going to kill himself. You hear the gunshot, and they just move on. But then they cut back to the scene and show that instead of shooting himself, he shot one of the zombies, and he's like, "You're going to have to earn your meal," and then he crawls away. And he pops up later in the movie. I always thought it was a problem. They shouldn't have showed us. They should have just let us figure out what happened to him. But in this, it's actually, there's a whole extended scene. So he shoots the zombie instead of himself, and he starts crawling back through this like vent system. And zombies are following him through the vents, and there's like a fan in the vent that he blocks with like a grenade or a gun or something, or some part of his equipment. And the zombie who's like, he crawls through the fan, and then there's like a zombie who's like halfway through and gets cut in half by the fan because like whatever he jammed in there breaks and it slices in half. I'm like, this is great. Like, this is a level of violence we should have had in the film that we just didn't get. The zombie's still coming after him or whatever. So he ends up blowing it up with a grenade. And then at that point, it's kind of left of, oh, what happened to him? So, a good chunk of this, the next little bit kind of proceeds similar to the film. They come to the room where the T-virus was held, and Alice remembers. So she goes in looking for the cure to help JD. And this is when Spence remembers what happened. And like the film, Spence doesn't do much in the script. So it's like he's always just kind of felt like a useless character until this point. So yeah, he remembers everything, realizes that he was the one that was trying to steal the virus and sell it, and he takes the virus and goes and leaves them locked in the room. And that's when the Red Queen comes in. There's the scene, "I've been a bad, bad girl. Similar in the script, but again, they have this little hologram function. And I should point out, like, as it's been going on, that due to the reboot and them like pulling her out, putting her back in, she's like kind of breaking down. She is like forgetting stuff, and the maps aren't always accurate and things like that. So her being a reliable character is kind of like out the window. But this is when the liquor is revealed. The liquor kills Spence. And she's like, I didn't expect any of you to get this far, so I didn't even bother telling you about this thing. But it's like, now it's something we're gonna have to deal with. A difference from the film is after the liquor eats him, it mutates, and it's like, oh, every time it feeds, it mutates or whatever. That does not happen in the script. It just is consistent. But again, it the liquor, it doesn't mutate in this version, but it shows up. It tries to attack them in the room just like it does in the movie. Oh my god, in the fucking movie, in the movie. But it kind of plays out similar. Kaplan, aka 12, shows up and does disable the Red Queen to get the door unlocked. No, correction, he just shows up. They kind of make it this whole thing of, it seems like they're trapped in from this point on the script until the last like 3 pages. It's kind of messy and convoluted. It was really hard for me to follow, so I'm going to try to do this as best as I can. Again, first drafts can be really tricky, and it kind of turns into this overly complicated scene that I think gets much more simplified in the actual film, even though that scene kind of doesn't make sense either if you go back and watch that movie. Because, in the movie, the liquor bursts through the window now that it's mutated, but Kaplan disables the Red Queen and opens the door, and they, but it seems like it's just the same hallway, and that the liquor could then just jump back out the window and be in the same hallway they're in. Like, I was always so confused by that. In this version, instead, he opens a door, and the Red Queen kind of leads them deeper into the hive, and eventually they come into like just a like square concrete room that's supposed to lead to like an emergency exit or something. And it's basically like a secret door in the wall that they are able to get open, and then it seems like they're trapped, and then it turns into like a ladder situation. I literally could not follow what the fuck was going on. One thing I should say that is good is that the script is a quick read and comes off short, just like the movie does. The movie's a quick in and out. So they fight the liquor on the platform of the train instead of like in the train. Some differences, if you remember in the film, they escape to the train platform and they find the body of Spence, who's like all torn up, and he turns into a zombie and is like crawling after her. That doesn't happen, even though that was actually a pretty good scene in the actual film. She does take his wedding ring though. They get on the platform and it starts to rise up, but the liquor ends up on the platform, and it turns into this whole thing where they're fighting on it. They end up like stalling the platform, and there's like a maintenance ladder, and they just start climbing up the ladder. But at this point, JD is really messed up, and I believe 12 gets injured by the liquor, so he gets infected that way. But so JD is like strapped to Matt as he climbs up the ladder, so they can like because he's weak from being injured, so then they can get up there. I should also point out that, as I said, how his role is switched with Rain. He does have the scene, which is kind of one of the more memorable scenes for the movie, where she's like bit and like dangling her bloody hands over the group of zombies on the pipes. That scene, literally, JD gets that scene. She transforms on the train at the end of the film, and again, JD is the one that changes because at this point Rain is dead. Also in the film, JD, he's the one that gets pulled into the room of zombies, gets all bit up and stuff, and then he shows up later in the maintenance tunnels and bites Rain on the neck. That doesn't happen in the script, which again I think is a good moment. You need that moment where, like, in a zombie film where you have somebody on your team or in the party that changes, and somebody's like, oh no, it's you, and like doesn't want to shoot them and stuff like, it's one of those like kind of stereotypical scenes you kind of need for one of these movies. But yeah, completely absent from the script. So I didn't take a lot of notes on like the actual fight that happens with the liquor, but one thing I remember is the platform rising kind of cuts off its tongue. In the movie, they cut off its tongue by like closing the train doors on it. And, this, since it's a rising platform, they basically like jam up the platform and it's going to fall. And, as it's falling, Alice leaps for the ladder. She, grabs onto it, but the liquor grabs onto her. She's trying to shake it off, but she can't. They want to try to shoot it, but Matt's got the gun, but JD's strapped to him, and JD turns into a zombie. It's pretty difficult to reach for a gun when you got a zombie on you. So it turns into like he gets the gun from JD, gets JD off of him, and he falls down, and they get, but the gun falls, and Alice just manages to catch it on its way down. She shoots the liquor. It falls down into the fiery wreck of the train platform, and Matt, Alice, and 12 escape. They make it to the mansion, and 12 is still alive. Matt is uninjured, which is different from the actual version we got. If you remember correctly in the movie, God fucking damn it. He is like leaning against the wall of the train when the liquor shows up, and it scratches through the train and like scratches his arm. And then as they're exiting the mansion, he starts mutating, and she tries to give him the antivirus, and then that's when the umbrella guys burst in and like take everybody. Similar, but it's not Matt. That's, the umbrella guys bust in and they take Alice and Matt, and 12 is like dying from his infection, and as they're trying to resuscitate him, he wakes up as a zombie and bites one of the guys, and then just like cuts. So it cuts to the hospital where Alice wakes up. It all plays out a little differently. In the version we got, she wakes up in the hospital. There's nobody there. She goes outside, and the city is decimated. The newspapers say the dead walk. Clearly the infection has reached the city, leading us into Resident Evil Apocalypse, aka Resident Evil 2, like similar to the video game. This version is totally different. We get her in the hospital. They're like trying to basically like torture her and get information from her, and then eventually that just kind of stops, and like people haven't been in for a while, and then her door opens. Clear they hint very heavily that people in the hospital are now zombies. She is wandering the hospital and ends up finding Matt. Clearly he's kind of in the same situation. They reunite, and then it's just like a hard cut to I'm sorry. They actually run into the White Queen in the hospital, which is, the Red Queen's sister computer hologram. This is something that actually shows up in Resident Evil Extinction, and this is actually going to be a running theme, having read the next script already. Resident Evil Extinction has a lot of elements in that script that were not used and then used in other movies, and, similar to this one. Because you're going to find out. So, the White Queen tells them that, like, they could not contain the infection and that it spread. And this movie cuts to 6 months later, and it's Matt and Alice, like, in an RV. He's now wearing Spence's wedding ring, implying that they're the version they see of married. And the world is already, it's a zombie apocalypse. And, I believe it says they're traveling to, like, Washington or something, or DC or something like that. It's New York, actually. They're heading towards like a devastated New York, looking for survivors. And like the movie just ends. And that's Resident Evil. Clearly they wanted to get to the whole apocalypse thing pretty early on, which is something that eventually didn't happen until Resident Evil Extinction, which is actually going to be the next script I cover. and that episode is going to release Monday. But yeah, Resident Evil. This is it. This is the end of this script. It's the first movie. The third, fourth, and maybe the fifth, we'll see how that script goes, are going to be coming up. I know it's been a while. I'm glad to be back. This might have been a little rough. Kept forgetting a lot of things I was trying to say. But I enjoy I hate saying like I enjoy shitting on movies because nobody sets out to make a bad movie, but these movies are kind of enjoyably bad, and reading the scripts kind of is too. Like, it's interesting to see how they started and what they became and all that. I am looking forward to discussing the next one. I am really looking forward to getting into the fourth script. I'm only like 20 pages in at this point, because the fourth movie, while I like it, it is pretty bad, and I just want to see the differences of, like, because there's things in that movie where it's like, oh man, this really bugged me that they did it this way, and like all they needed was like one line, like one throwaway line to justify this for me, and I almost want to see if that's in the script and maybe just got cut. As far as like the differences between the script and the first movie, some of the stuff is in deleted scenes on the DVD, and I've always had like a special relationship with Resident Evil because it was the first DVD that I like dug into the special features. I don't know why it was the first one. It was just like I had that DVD in, and I'm just like, oh, I don't really know what all this stuff is, so let's check it out. It was the first audio commentary for a movie I ever heard, and it's one I do kind of recommend to people because it's, yeah, they talk about like making the movie a little bit, but honestly, there's a good chunk of it that's just them fucking around, and it was just kind of fun to listen to the actors and stuff just fuck around, and I had a good time with that. So yeah, I you know, Paul W.S. Anderson, writer not so much, but I think he can direct a good movie, and maybe it's just he shouldn't write his movies. I'd actually like to go back and see how many of his movies that I like are ones he wrote or ones that other people wrote, or, you know, what his involvement was in that writing process. He didn't direct the second or third movie. I believe the second one was because of Alien vs. Predator. I don't know why he didn't direct the third movie, but I do think the direction of the third movie is maybe the best one. I don't know. I actually really like the third movie. It's always kind of bugged me how the franchise veered so far away from the video games. I actually think the CGI movies, there's 3 of them, Resident Evil, trying to remember the names, Degeneration, Damnation, and Vendetta, I believe. I believe they're all good in their own ways. Degeneration, for the most part, is just kind of boring. Damnation is the best Resident Evil movie, hands down, and Vendetta is the most ridiculous Resident Evil movie, but also the second best one. It's a franchise so ripe for film, and it amazes me that they just went in such a different direction for the series. And I apparently they're working on a reboot. Like, it was always announced that after the 6th movie, the final chapter, that there would be a reboot of the franchise. And allegedly the guy who's currently doing the Mortal Kombat movie, which is filming right now, which I do have a script for that I want to I'm really dying to get to. But I would love to see a reboot of the franchise. Maybe make it stick closer to the games this time, because I feel like that's what people want, those characters from the games. And while some of them do pop up throughout the franchise, they never felt right. Like, we never got the series that we deserved. So I am ready for someone to take another shot at it. There was also a pilot that like leaked for a TV series that I actually would have been totally down with, because like the fucking pilot was super strong. It leaked online. I don't know if you can find it. I think it's only like 20 minutes or something. It was like a police procedural type show almost, but it was very strong, whatever it was, and I want to actually try to track that down again. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today's episode. So I'm hoping that there won't be as long of a hiatus between this block of episodes and the next. So I am gonna have another one on Monday and one on Halloween. I am committed to that. Now that I've actually sat down and recorded an episode, I can feel it in my blood. I want to keep doing this. I'm also working on getting some t-shirts up. I'm not really going to be pushing them very hard, but just know if you buy one t-shirt, it's probably going to cover my server costs for 1 month. So if you want to support the show, that is the best way to do it, because, you know, server costs, that's been a thing of, like, while I've been sitting on not recording stuff, I've actually considered maybe just shutting down the show, because it's like these server costs, you know, it can be a burden, and if I'm not putting out content, it was like really eating away at me. But I want to have a podcast. I want to keep doing a podcast, and I know I can't be as consistent as I would like to be, especially because I gave myself a podcast that requires homework. I should be recording like some standalone episodes in between scripts. You know, I have a lot of stuff to say about a lot of movies, and unfortunately, I kind of pigeonholed myself in this position of I wasn't interested in a lot of things and wasn't wanting to talk about a lot of things, but I feel like there's a lot of stuff coming out right now that I'd love to talk about. So I'm going to try to make more of an effort. So again, today we talked about Resident Evil. Next week, we're going to talk about Resident Evil Extinction, Halloween, Resident Evil Aftermath. Maybe in November, there might be a Resident Evil Retribution episode. We'll see how that script is, if it's worth covering or not. If not, the next one might be William Gibson's Alien 3, which it's a little bit of a cheat because I believe there is an actual script for this out there, but I am currently reading the comic book version that they put out that just came out recently, I believe through Dark Horse, I think did it. They adapted that script as a comic book, so I am going to be taking a look at that and using the comic book version, which I will have a disclaimer that, like, hey, I'm sure there's plenty in the script that is not in the comic, but I am not sure. A coworker of mine just listened to the audio tape version, or an audio book version. They put out an audio book, and they actually had like voice cast, like Michael Biehn and what's his name, who played Bishop, Lance Henriksen, who, like, you know, read parts and stuff in it, and we were kind of comparing back and forth, and it seems pretty similar, so it's probably the same. But that's going to be it for today's episode. Be sure to rate us, give us them 5 stars. Also, you can check us out on Podcoin, which is like a podcast app where you get coins, like for every hour you listen to, or every 10 minutes or something, you get a coin, and then you can use those coins for cool gifts. So check us out on Podcoin. You can follow the show on there as well. Yeah, you can email the show at shelvedfilmpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at shelvedpodcast. I am working on doing some Twitter stuff where I want to take some movies and just like break them down into a writing, or from a writing standpoint. I did a poll on which movie I'm going to do first, which was Spider-Verse, or Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the Sony animated Spider-Man movie that was incredible. There's a lot to say about it from a writing perspective. I'm probably going to be putting up a couple more polls of other movies to vote on for future episodes. And I might use some from that first poll that like didn't make it, because there's a couple in that first poll that I'd like to talk about. But check the Twitter. I'm going to put up a couple more polls, and those are actually just going to be like tweet threads, because I haven't been as active on that Twitter as I should. So I wanted to find a way to use the Twitter more than just like promoting the episodes and stuff. So I want to like break down some movies on Twitter, and that's what I'm going to do it. So go check out the Twitter at Shelved Podcast to vote on those polls, but those will be up pretty soon. But make sure you do all that. Check us out. I promise I'll be back next week with another episode for Resident Evil Extinction.